Hey everybody, this is Kohdok here, and I have been sent a lovely package by Stoneblade Entertainment for their new game. Now, Stoneblade Entertainment are the makers of a game called Ascension, a game that, believe it or not, I have not played. Now, Ascension is a deck-building game similar to Dominion, where you start the game with a small deck of kind of weak units that you then use to buy stronger units, which then get added to your deck over time. However, unlike the Dominion system, where all of the cards that can be purchased are always available for everybody, with Ascension, instead you shuffle a deck and deal like the top, I believe, 6 cards from the top of the deck, and that becomes the marketplace, and when a player purchases a card from the marketplace or fights a monster, those can appear in the Ascension deck as well. A new card is dealt from the top of the deck. It's what I call a rolling queue format. It's a pretty common, it's probably the most common form of deck builder. Marvel Legendary has that, Star Realms has that. There are, I've been sent a number of games that use the rolling queue. That massive Enchanter's box has a twist on it where you don't have a deck, but you still keep the rolling queue format. But yeah, it's a pretty successful game. It's been around since 2010, and it's still going pretty strong. It's a decently popular game. But today they have sent me a new game that they are working on, which is called Soulforge. Yes, I know the name invocation brings to mind another game. We'll get into that. We'll discuss this. Although I will stress before we open this box, you can see this is by a company called Artiforge. Ironically enough, another use of the word forge. They are a digital printer, which means that the things in this box are not likely the production models. They are mock-ups. We're no stranger to mock-ups on these channel. I've featured them a few times before, and I'm always happy to feature mock-ups on the channel, but if something seems like unpolished or a little janky or maybe a bit unfinished, that is probably why, is because these are mock-ups that were printed on demand. Like I said, print-on-demand services are fantastic for making mock-ups. They're a great thing if you want to show off a proof of concept, which is what we have here today. So, like I said, the heads up, if something doesn't look perfect, it's probably because it's a mock-up. So let's have a look inside. So, we have been sent a bunch of stuff. We have been sent 2 copies of the Soulforge Fusion starter set, which contains 4 of the half decks, 2 game boards, and 20 minion cards. Although, since this is a mock-up, it doesn't have the game boards, but they've sent us the permanent mats to make up for that. We've been sent a pair of these. Like I said, the boxes do look a little flimsy. They look a bit scratched, but like I said, these are mock-ups. I'm sure the final version of the box will be like the nice hard cardboard, like my Jukum box here. So, like I said, that's just a bit of jank that comes with being a mock-up. We also got a tin, a dice tin with the Soulforge logo on there. Like I said, this is a mock-up, so it lacks a bit of polish, but that's fine. From here, it actually kind of looks like glow-in-the-dark ink. You know, it had that like slight green-gray tinge to it. I doubt it is, but this is an example of how a future version might look. And of course, we were sent a pair of playmats. So let's get these playmats started first, because even though Soulforge does invoke the Keyforge name, and it does so for a reason, that reason being that you are sent decks that are semi-random. They are a bit like Keyforge is a game where they have essentially nothing but randomly drafted decks using cards from a specifically generated set. However, the randomness of the decks is permanent. They have a unique card back and thus cannot be mixed with other decks. So, Soulforge also has a similar system where it is permanently random decks. However, that is where its similarities with Keyforge ends, so I'm not entirely sure why they invoked the Keyforge name. If anything, it has a lot more in common with Magic's Jumpstart, where you're supposed to take 2 of these decks inside of here and shuffle them together to form your full deck. But let's get down to the layout, because the goal of the game has nothing to do with how Keyforge works. Like what with Stoneblade did with Ascension, they took a popular game and they simplified it. It has a lot fewer moving parts than Keyforge does, and whether or not that is your thing is kind of up to you. But the goal is, it is another life point total game, but the goal of this game is to decrease your opponent's health total to 0 from its starting total of 50 by essentially doing a League of Legends and sending your forces, trying to push damage through one of 5 lanes. Of course, your opponent would also get a mat like this and are trying to do the same thing. So you play your character cards into these lanes to try to push damage to hit your opponent, while your opponent is trying to do the same thing. And of course, you can put monsters in their way to try to prevent that from happening as well. So it's a much more straightforward design. There aren't really a lot of counters to keep track of. There are, of course, your life total and the remaining life total of your characters, but it is otherwise, like I said, it has a lot more in common with Jumpstart, where you're supposed to mix a couple of decks together. So let's take a closer look at what we've gotten here. Okay, so here's a better look at the box that we have here, the Soulforge Fusion box. Like I said, the box looks a little kitschy right now, but like I said, it's a mock-up. It'll be like the Jukum box by production, I'm sure. But inside this box is a 2-player starter set, and it's a mock-up of a 2-player starter set, so it's not quite complete. It doesn't have the 2 playmats in there. That's why they sent us these bad boys. Doesn't have any of the counters. That's why they sent these. But the important thing is the decks that we have inside. Now, with Keyforge, what happens in Keyforge is you have like a completely generated deck that contains 3 factions. For Soulforge, instead, you are given the choice to pick 2 decks that feature 2 different Forgeborn. These are our playable characters. They are basically the faction that's in this game, and you have to build a deck that combines 2 different Forgeborn. So, for example, even though I do have another Cersei in the form of Arrogantly Sparking Frog Cersei versus Famously Melodic Advisor Cersei, I cannot shuffle 2 Cersei decks together. They have to be 2 different archetypes. Like I said, it is, again, just like Magic the Gathering Jumpstart. In that you combine the decks together. I think that has a lot of interesting potential to it, because a suggestion I've heard about how you can use Jumpstart is you can then partition out those decks again and then use them randomly. So in theory, once you get up to like 16, 20 of these decks, that's a cube that you could do rapid draft with, where people do like the Dominion thing. Like Dominion cards normally have like a brown back to them, but all of the Dominion expansions include an additional copy of each card with a blue back. And what you're supposed to do is shuffle those together to draw random cards to make it so that the pool of cards that are played in the game of Dominion are truly randomized. Do that with the Forgeborn characters, and you could have yourself a fun game night with totally random decks. Of course, you can also choose to combine 2 decks together, any 2 decks together to form a full deck. So for example, if I go with Kohdok and Cersei here, I can combine their decks together. Now, the way these decks are used is a bit different compared to a lot of games, because what happens is you actually it's a game that takes place over the course of 4 turns, which have 4 rounds, which have 3 turns each. So and each of those turns, you draw a fresh hand of 5 cards, Dominion style, in order to play. So you basically go through your whole deck 4 times. Now what happens is, each time you play a card out of your deck, you actually level it up. Your Forgeborn levels up at the end of each turn too. So on the first turn they have no ability, but on the second they gain, each turn that goes by, they gain a new one-shot that they can use during the turn. So you combine 2 Forgeborn together, but you only get to play as one. If I combine these 2 decks, I can play as either Kohdok or Cersei, just one of those 2, and get their abilities for the entire game. Each turn, each of the 12 turns you have, you can play up to 2 cards from your hand. And you want to play those cards from your hand, because what happens is the cards actually come in 3 levels. You have level 1, you have level 2, and finally you have level 3. Each of these cards levels up, and in order to level up a card, you have to play it. So at the start of the game, you combine only the level 1 cards in the stack together to form a deck of 20 cards. So these two would shuffle together, while the level 2 and the level 3 get set to the side in an upgrade card zone. So what happens is, if it's my turn and I play Undeady, I would then seek out the level 2 version of Undeady and put it in the discard pile. This is similar to how it's done in Dominion, where the cards you use to pay a cost and the card that you buy by paying that cost get put into the same discard pile to get shuffled back in. The cards you play, like if Undeady is destroyed by battle, this level 1 Undeady, it actually goes to a banish pile and does not get shuffled back in. So essentially, when you play a copy of a card, it gets replaced in the discard pile by a higher level version of that card. And since you go through essentially your whole deck, what happens is, during each of the 3 turns, you discard your remaining cards and draw up to draw a fresh hand of 5 cards. So you go through 15 of your 20 cards. Then you shuffle your discard pile and your deck back together to go into the next round. So you go in with some new, upgraded, and stronger cards. You have several types of cards. You have the creature cards seen here, and you also have spell cards, such as Vyric's Embrace. So they kind of do the same thing. You can play up to 2 cards per turn, and play is simultaneous. What happens is, one player will have the Forge, and that determines their ability to, that determines the position. They get to go first. It also determines what position the cards get played in. They have the backside here, which is an unlit Forge. Although personally, I would have done like what Mage Wars does, and instead put like a portrait of the character on the back here, with the lit Forge on the top, which just gets passed back and forth between players. That would be a very easy way to have cards with all the same back that could be easily used to draft the players together. But what happens is, these are the lanes. Like I said, they are similar to the lanes you might find in a game like League of Legends, where your goal is to play creatures that are then able to push damage through the lane to hit your opponent, while also playing cards that can oppose an opponent's creature. So you have some choices to make. You can either try to play cards and get them in unopposed so that they deal damage to your opponent, or you can try to block your opponent with one of your cards to attempt to prevent them from dealing damage to you. And this has an effect depending on who holds the Forge that turn, because only a Forge player is able to play cards in the front row. You have a front row and a back row, and only front row is able to launch an attack against your opponent in an attempt to deal damage. A back row character can still block and damage monsters in the front row, but they cannot launch an attack on your own. And at the end of a turn, one of the 12 turns, once both players are done playing cards or taking any other actions, the combat happens simultaneously to end each turn. You then discard what remains of your hand and draw back up 5 more cards. Now, only the player with the Forge can play in the front row on that turn. Otherwise, you're stuck playing in the back row and are forced to play more defensively. So this trades back and forth between players with that kind of decision making. Not to mention the fact that the only way to level up cards is to play them, and each round you can only upgrade like 6 cards unless you have a card that can be played for free. For example, Undeady here has the ability, if you have a damaged creature in play, this is free. It also, however, has the ability Aggressive, meaning it can only be played in the front row, meaning I assume you can only play it when you are in control of the Forge. So there are a lot of ups and downs in how this game works. Now, each creature has an attack and a defense. It can depend on the creature, although I'm not terribly a fan of the icon they use for attack. I've pointed this out to them directly, but what it is it's supposed to be like a red battle axe, but because of the shape and the kind of round blobbiness they've given it, when you put a number on there, it looks kind of like a heart and might be mistaken for like a health score or something. But yeah, the goal is to just keep playing in order to get the stronger and stronger characters, so that you can level them up all the way and really get the going. Although in the case of Veteran Warstoker, it looks like it just gets tougher and just has a solid 9 damage every round. That's really powerful. I wonder if this I wonder if this was a mistake. But yeah, that's the central theme. It's that you're supposed to mix the cards of the different attributes to make sure that you have a nice contrast. Those get shuffled together. Like I said, you can pick and choose, or you could make it randomized, which on its face is already a lot more than what Keyforge offers. You have the special abilities. You can use abilities on your. You can only use them once per game. However, you are basically allowed to activate them for free. They don't count towards one of your 2 cards you can play that turn, and that's the trick with spells as well. Is you can only play one. You can only play 2 cards per turn, but it does level up that spell. Spells get levels up the same way. It's kind of weird with all the leveling up going on here. You'd think this would be the game called Ascension. But yeah, it has a whole lot more customizable possibility than Keyforge. It has a lot fewer moving parts. You only have the damage counters, which they prevented some countdown D10s for me to handle to keep track of both your own score. Like a popular method to do it is to have one be the 10 slot and one be the 1 slot. Although I guess this helm here is meant to be our 0. To count like that, and then you use these are spin down dice, so you got like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 6, 7, 8, 9 helmet to count how much damage is currently on each of the characters and on yourself. Like I said, not too difficult, pretty straightforward. Like I said, it probably has more in common with League of Legends than it does with Keyforge, with the lanes and the leveling up and all of that. It would not surprise me if this might have been like a draft for a League of Legends game. But yeah, like I said, I think it has a lot of potential. There is actually a decent reason to collect. With Keyforge, its biggest problem is once you get a deck, that's it. There's nothing you can do with it. But for Soulforge, like I said, you can turn the draft decks. You can turn these decks into draft components where players can put a deck together randomly. They can do it deliberately or randomly. You can draft it over and over again, get different combinations. I've seen some games that use that mechanic, and like I said, I think that's a mechanic that would work really well here, and I hope that that's something that they go for. But yeah, this is Solforge Fusion. This is the appropriate full name for it, going by the back of the card. This is by Stoneblade Entertainment, and they are launching a Kickstarter for the game pretty soon. If you guys want to get a look at the game for yourself, then by all means, you can have some fun doing that. But until next time, this is Kohdok signing off.